People often underestimate the power of a woman's silence. They assume it's emptiness, passivity, or indifference. But a woman's silence when she's been ignored, dismissed, or made to feel invisible isn't weakness. It's strategy, it's wisdom in motion. It's the moment she stops talking and starts listening to her own intuition again. When a woman is constantly explaining herself, constantly trying to be heard or understood, she's operating from emotional noise, not from alignment. But when she falls silent, that noise stops, the emotional fog clears, and what emerges is clarity, piercing, unapologetic clarity. Silence gives her perspective. It allows her to step back and see the dynamic for what it really is. She begins to notice the patterns, how much she was giving, how little was being reciprocated, how her energy was being consumed rather than appreciated. That's when she realizes silence isn't the absence of communication. It's the beginning of self-communication, because in silence she starts to hear her own thoughts again. She reconnects with her own emotional truth, not the version filtered through someone else's behavior. That's when her power begins to shift inward. You see, a woman's silence is unsettling not because it's empty, but because it's full of awareness. It's full of decisions she hasn't announced yet. When she stops reacting, she stops feeding the dynamic that disrespected her. And when she stops feeding it, she starts starving what was draining her spirit, and this is where the real transformation happens. The silence you perceive as distance is actually her restoration. It's her building new boundaries, new priorities, new self-respect. It's her observing the difference between attention and value, between being seen and being truly understood. Psychologically, silence is the moment she shifts from external validation to internal grounding. She no longer needs someone to tell her she matters. She's learning to feel it from within. That's why her silence is so powerful, because it's no longer about you, it's about her evolution. And when a woman reaches that level of peace, it's magnetic. You can feel it even when she says nothing. She enters a room differently. She looks lighter, calmer, yet more certain. That's what happens when a woman learns not to react emotionally to neglect, but to respond spiritually to it. You can't manipulate silence. You can't argue with it. It reflects everything back. It exposes motives, reveals truths, and demands accountability without a single word being spoken. So when she goes quiet, don't assume she's waiting. She's not waiting for a message, an apology, or attention. She's waiting for herself to come back home to her peace, her purpose, her power, because silence, for a woman who has been ignored, is not the end of connection, it's the beginning of transformation. And the moment she embraces that silence, she doesn't lose anything, she reclaims everything. After silence comes redirection. That's the stage people never expect, the moment when she decides that all the energy she was once pouring into trying to be understood will now be redirected into understanding herself. And that shift is profound, because when a woman stops chasing clarity from others, she starts creating clarity within. You see, emotional energy is currency. Every time she texts first, over-explains, or tries to fix what she didn't break, she's spending that currency. And when she's ignored, when her presence is taken for granted, she realizes something powerful. She's been investing her emotional wealth into something that gives her no return. That realization stings at first, but it's also liberating. Because once she sees it, she stops. She stops pouring into people who can't hold her value, and that energy, once scattered, begins to return to her. Now she starts redirecting it into her growth, her peace, her purpose. She starts reading again, meditating, journaling, maybe revisiting an old dream she had abandoned. She changes her morning routine, her circle, even her self-talk. She's not running from the pain anymore, she's converting it into fuel. Psychologically, this redirection marks a shift from attachment energy to creation energy. She's no longer trying to repair what's broken outside of her. She's building something unshakable inside. That's the moment her confidence begins to regenerate, not the surface level kind that depends on compliments or attention, but the deeper kind that comes from discipline and self-respect. It's fascinating because from the outside, people might think she's moved on. But what's really happening is that she's reclaiming authorship of her story. She's writing herself back into the narrative, no longer as a supporting role in someone else's emotional movie, but as the main character of her own evolution. Philosophically, this is an act of alchemy, the transformation of emotional pain into personal power. Every woman who has ever been ignored or underestimated has this ability within her. The difference lies in whether she chooses to stay stuck in reaction or to rise in redirection. And here's what makes it so striking. Once she redirects her energy inward, her external world starts to change without her forcing anything. Opportunities appear. People respond differently. Life begins to mirror her new vibration. Because energy never disappears, it only changes form. The love she once gave freely doesn't die. It simply returns to her as strength, focus, and glow. She learns that attention isn't love and silence isn't loss. The only real loss is wasting her energy trying to make someone see what they were never capable of recognizing. So when she redirects her energy, she's not closing a chapter, she's rewriting the book. She's reminding herself that her energy is sacred, that not everyone deserves access to it, and that the moment she stops giving it away to indifference, she begins to radiate with purpose again. Because the truth is, the same energy that was breaking her is the energy that will build her once she decides to claim it back. Clarity is the quiet reward of her redirection. When she stops giving her energy to what drains her, her perception shifts. The fog begins to lift. What once seemed complicated suddenly becomes simple, not because the situation changed, but because she did. You see, when a woman is emotionally entangled, she doesn't see clearly. She interprets neglect as mystery, inconsistency as complexity, silence as depth. She gives the benefit of the doubt to behavior that actually deserves accountability. But once she starts focusing her energy inward, she gains distance, and distance gives perspective. Psychologically, this is where emotional detachment meets awakening. She starts to look at patterns rather than promises, actions rather than words. She begins to realize that love isn't measured by intensity but by consistency. And that realization changes everything. Clarity is painful at first because it forces her to confront the truth she tried to soften. She begins to see that the connection she was fighting to preserve may have existed more in her mind than in reality. That's not weakness, that's awakening. Because clarity doesn't just show her who someone else truly is, it reveals who she's been while trying to hold on, and this is where her strength truly takes form. She notices how much of her self-worth had become tied to external validation. She sees how often she confused effort with love, attention with care, and potential with compatibility. These are the illusions that fall away when clarity enters. Philosophically, clarity is the moment when she shifts from emotional blindness to emotional intelligence. She begins to understand that not every connection is meant to be permanent. Some exist only to teach her boundaries, discernment, and self-awareness. And it's in this awareness that her peace begins to return, because once you see clearly, you stop negotiating your value. You stop trying to prove your worth in spaces that can't see it. You stop expecting depth from people who only swim in the shallow end. The beauty of this stage is that she doesn't need closure anymore. She becomes her own closure. She doesn't need explanations. The truth is enough. She doesn't need validation. Her clarity is her confirmation. From the outside, this clarity may look like detachment, but it's not coldness, it's understanding. It's the kind of calm that comes when you finally stop trying to rewrite reality and start accepting it for what it is. And when a woman reaches that level of clarity, her choices change. She starts walking differently, not because she's bitter, but because she's awake. Her boundaries become firm, her standards rise, and her energy becomes sacred. Because once a woman truly sees, she cannot unsee, and once she knows the truth, she no longer chases illusions. Clarity doesn't just open her eyes, it sets her free. Once she sees clearly, something within her shifts permanently. She no longer reacts, she evolves. That's the subtle but powerful difference between a woman who's still seeking validation and a woman who has found her truth. Reaction is rooted in emotion, transformation is rooted in awareness. When she was still caught in the storm of confusion, she reacted. She argued to be heard, explained to be understood, gave chances hoping things would change. But now, with clarity, she realizes that reacting only drained her further. Because reacting is a form of attachment, it keeps her tied to what hurt her. Transformation, on the other hand, is liberation. You see, transformation isn't loud. It's not about revenge or proving a point. It's quiet, intentional, and deeply internal. It's her choosing to no longer operate from wounded energy. It's her learning to respond with wisdom rather than emotion. It's her deciding that peace is a higher priority than attention. Psychologically, transformation is the process of integration when she takes the lessons from her pain and turns them into power. She starts understanding the deeper meaning behind the experience. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" she starts asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" That single shift moves her from victimhood to mastery. And mastery doesn't mean she no longer feels, it means she feels deeply, but no longer lets those feelings control her. That's emotional maturity. That's spiritual evolution. From the outside, her transformation might be misunderstood. People might call her cold, detached, or different. But she's not different, she's refined. She no longer reacts to every emotional trigger because she has outgrown the need to prove her worth. The old version of her would have fought for validation. The new version doesn't need to, she embodies it. This transformation is holistic. You see it in how she speaks, how she dresses, how she carries herself. She no longer moves with urgency. She moves with intention. She's not trying to be chosen anymore. She's choosing herself daily. Philosophically, transformation is the art of transmuting pain into purpose. It's what happens when a woman realizes that every heartbreak, every silence, every disappointment was never meant to destroy her, it was meant to shape her. And this is where her power becomes undeniable, because when a woman transforms, she doesn't return to who she was before the pain. She becomes someone entirely new, someone wiser, calmer, more magnetic. The kind of woman who no longer seeks closure because she's too focused on creation. She's not reacting to loss, she's responding to growth. She's not trying to rebuild what broke, she's building something entirely her own. And that's the shocking beauty of it. Her transformation doesn't scream revenge, it radiates rebirth. Because when a woman stops reacting and starts transforming, she doesn't rise from the ashes to prove anyone wrong, she rises to prove herself right. After transformation comes detachment. And this stage is perhaps the most misunderstood because when a woman learns detachment, people assume she's become emotionless, cold, or distant. But in truth, detachment isn't the absence of emotion, it's the presence of balance. It's her ability to feel everything deeply, yet not be ruled by anything. When she was still reacting, her emotions controlled her. Every text, every silence, every inconsistency could shake her mood. But now, she's learned that attachment is often disguised dependency, the illusion that her peace depends on someone else's actions, and that illusion is what she finally releases. Psychologically, detachment is an act of emotional self-regulation. It's not shutting down, it's reclaiming control. It's her saying, "I can love you, but I don't need your validation to feel whole." That's the point where emotional maturity truly begins, because love without attachment is freedom, and freedom is power. In this phase, she doesn't beg, chase, or explain, not because she's angry, but because she's grounded. Her energy is steady, and her self-worth is no longer conditional. She's detached from outcomes because she's rooted in self-trust. She knows that what's meant for her will stay, and what's not will leave, and either way, she'll be fine. There's a deep kind of peace that comes from this understanding. When she no longer tries to control the uncontrollable, she begins to live from a place of surrender, not weakness, but wisdom. Surrender doesn't mean she's given up. It means she's finally aligned with reality. She no longer confuses attachment with love or obsession with care. She can love deeply without losing herself. Philosophically, detachment is an advanced form of love that comes without possession, expectation, or fear. It's love that says, I choose you, but I also choose me. This is where her emotional intelligence peaks, because true strength is not in holding on tightly, it's in knowing when to let go gracefully. And the beauty of detachment is that it creates space, space for peace, space for alignment, space for what's truly meant to be. She no longer fills her mind with what ifs or whys. Instead, she lives in the calm certainty that what's real doesn't require force. When she reaches this level, she doesn't seek closure from anyone. She becomes her own closure, her own comfort, her own completion. And ironically, that's when she becomes even more magnetic, because nothing is more attractive than a woman who isn't seeking to be completed by anyone. She moves differently now, quiet, confident, and light. She's not attached to people, outcomes, or opinions. She's attached only to her peace. Because once a woman learns detachment, she doesn't stop loving, she just starts loving from freedom, not from fear. And finally, when she's silent, redirected, clear, transformed, and detached, something remarkable happens. She stops needing validation. That's the final stage of her evolution. The moment she realizes that approval, attention, and reassurance from others were never the source of her worth, they were merely reflections of the worth she hadn't yet recognized within herself. You see, when a woman is still learning herself, she unconsciously builds her identity around how others see her. Compliments feed her confidence, rejection threatens it. It's not because she's weak, it's because she's human. We all crave acknowledgement, but the danger begins when acknowledgement becomes addiction, when her emotional stability depends on whether someone sees her value instead of her simply knowing it. When she reaches this stage, though, that need dissolves. Not because she's hardened or cynical, but because she's now rooted in something unshakable: self-validation. She no longer asks, am I enough for them? She asks, are they aligned with the version of me I'm becoming? That's the difference between insecurity and awareness. Psychologically, this is what self-actualization looks like. She's transcended the lower emotional patterns of approval, seeking. Her sense of identity no longer depends on external feedback, but on internal alignment. She recognizes that other people's opinions are often projections, not truths, reflections of their own limitations, not measures of her value. And when she stops seeking validation, she moves with quiet authority. Her voice carries weight not because she's trying to prove a point, but because she's speaking from experience. Her boundaries are no longer emotional reactions, they're spiritual filters. She no longer over-explains herself, because peace has become more important than being understood. This is also where her confidence shifts from appearance to essence. It's not about how she looks or how others perceive her. It's about how she feels in her own skin, in her own choices, in her own solitude. She no longer fears being alone because she's learned the difference between loneliness and alignment. Loneliness is emptiness, alignment is wholeness, and she has found that wholeness within herself. Philosophically, when she stops needing validation, she becomes untouchable, not invincible, but deeply secure. She's no longer moved by flattery, nor broken by silence. Her emotions have matured into equilibrium. This is what real empowerment looks like, the quiet kind that doesn't need to announce itself, yet transforms everything it touches. And from this space, her relationships change too. She no longer attracts people who need to feed on her energy. She attracts equals, those who meet her where she is, not those who drain her to feel powerful. Because when you don't need validation, you naturally stop entertaining situations that compromise your value. That's the full circle, the journey from silence to self-certainty, from seeking love externally to embodying it internally. Because when a woman stops needing validation, she doesn't become indifferent, she becomes free. And that freedom is the most shocking transformation of all.